And I never get to it, and I never know what to do with it. I
Yeah.
find it just sort of haunts me. Like that
Mm-hmm.
piece of fabric that I thought was so awesome just
Yeah.
doesn't do it. Just stays there. So I'm I'm anti-stash at this point, but I don't have the space for it either.
Well,
So I
yeah,
think,
mine are in
you know,
plastic containers in the basement. Most
Mine
of
are
them.
plastic containers too.
Yep.
Cool. Now, you also are a librarian. And when we came up here, one of the things is we had to meet you later because you were doing a sewing class at the library.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well, this was kind of a cool. So this is one of the things I love about my job. I have been able to take my personal hobbies and turn them into classes that I teach children, and I'm considered this awesome for passing on these different
Hugely
creative
awesome.
skills.
And you work at a public library?
Yeah, I work at a public library in the south suburbs of Chicago, and I am the teen librarian. But in many of the classes that I've done like this, I work with tweens and teens, like say 10 and ups.
How old do you think is like the optimal to start learning crafting and sewing and things like that?
I don't think there's any age that's too young to start playing with things, but it kind of depends. You have to know your kid and how much of a perfectionist they are. Because when you're a little kid, art is about exploration. Oh, and my gosh, Claire made more pieces of cut up little paper than my daughter, that is. I can't even begin to describe the stash of just random cut copy paper, and she'd tape and glue this, but she loved it. And you know, I really believe that on almost a spiritual level, every human being needs some form of creative outlet. Now, for some people, that's got to be high art, and that they are, you know, being on the cutting edge, and you know, they've studied the techniques and what have you. But for people like me, you know, it's this much more kind of mellow level. The only times when it's not mellow is when you have a deadline that you're trying to meet, or when your daughter's nagging you about the cape that you started like 5 years ago and didn't finish.
Totally.
But that's a different story.
Life.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I've sort of lost the thread of the question.
So
the sewing class.
And the kids and sort of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so so for me, it's just been this blessing, because it actually started with crochet and then knitting, because I'm like,
very cool.
I want to learn how to do this again. I only vaguely remember. I took this one lesson in short week lesson class in college, and I'm like, I should be able to figure out how to knit. And I'm trying to cast on using these directions. Then suddenly I remember, oh, that's right, she said the drawing was wrong. And so trying to cast on with something that I was trying to remember from 15 years before that was not quite right, you know, and it was hysterical. But I mean, I again, got some books and kind of taught myself some of the basics, and got to the point where I was exploring it, and I was like, I am literally not more than a week ahead of you guys, because I had one person who was artistic far more than me, and she was just boom, you know,
really
and
awesome.
and her work looked really amazing, and mine was just so sloppy. But you know, you can't get much done when you're teaching others. But when it came to the opportunity, we saw these. There's an organization in Illinois. I think I don't know if it's just Illinois or if it's wider than that. That receives items as tax deductible donations from different businesses that have overstock, in essence.
Yeah.
And if you're a not-for-profit organization, you can sign up to be a recipient of these, and then you essentially have to pay your membership fee and shipping and handling on some of the stuff, most of the stuff. So their warehouse is out somewhere in Western Illinois, and but at one point they advertised they had these little sewing machines, and I'm like, well, that could be a lot of fun to play with. And so my boss at the time was, like, well, yeah, let's give that a shot. And so we bought 4 of them, and they were $25 a piece.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then they came up again, and we now have about 15 of them.
That's so cool.
And I have 4 back at work waiting for me to untangle them before Tuesday, before my next class session. But we've had them now, I want to say 5-6 years, and I've taught several different levels of sewing class. I have found that much like with any kind, well, number one, I'm not a teacher. I don't have lesson plans. I don't have things written out. I'm much more of a workshop facilitator. You're going to do things, and I'm going to guide you bit by bit. That's cool when it's 2 or 3 or 6 people. Mm-hmm. But this summer, I lost my mind, and I've got more than 20.
That's amazing.
In my class, and we're making this little stuffed turtle. It's a very old-fashioned type of stuffed animal pattern, mm-hmm. Though I suppose you could make it with something that was fuzzy and it would look a little more modern. But yeah, it's a very simple pattern that I found online through Pinterest, and and it's not hard to do as a project. I mean, I started and finished one on a Sunday afternoon, so like 4 or 5 hours for me, mm-hmm. but we've set aside 12 hours of class time for these kids because
that's really great.
Some of them really, really need hands-on, being shown exactly what to do individually. And some of them can kind of get it when they have it explained. This mm-hmm. is the next thing. Or they can project and they're like, okay, so if this is how I sewed on the head and the tail, I'm going to do the same thing with the legs.
That's really great. So what's the age range, do you think?
That's 10 and up.
That's really great.
And if I'm working with machines, I don't think I would want to work with younger than 10. Mm-hmm. I mean, when Clara was really little, we got her a kid's toy sewing machine that was supposed to really sew, but mm-hmm. it didn't really sew squat, But she just liked the idea of being able to sew like mom and grandma.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the more chances you can give little kids, the better.
For most of them, is this the first time sewing, do you think?
Yes. Yeah. For most of them, this is their first time sewing on a machine, definitely. And for some of them, it's their first time sewing ever.
And how are they taking to it? Do they like it?
They are, yeah. For the most part, they're doing real well. The hardest thing is having them slow down enough to be patient and cut carefully.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Still.
Well, yeah. I mean, because especially with that's the one down thing about quilts, because sometimes it's like, oh my God, if I see any more of these little blue squares, I'm going to lose my mind. You get bored, but
no, I do too.
But it's all worth it in the end. Yeah, I have one poor boy. He's very sweet, but that child, I don't know what he's not going to have a turtle. He's going to have some kind of mutant blob because he has chopped off all the edges and the quarters and he cut the pattern wrong. And then once he cut the pattern wrong, he cut the fabric wrong. And I'm trying to help this kid, and I'm like, oh heavens.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's goofy.
And your daughter, who's 16, she
Yes.
comes to help.
Yes.
Now, does she like to sew, or she just required to like forcing your child to come, which I do all the time.
So I have a summer volunteer program, and my daughter has volunteered in the Army sense of the word,
right.
For this program since she was going into 6th grade.
Fabulous.
But, I take her once a week, and I have used her a lot for the classes because she does know how to thread the machines. She does understand the concepts of sewing.
Right.
She hasn't really taken to sewing things on her own, but she has so many other means of creative expression between writing and music, and just, being a high school student is incredibly busy.
Yeah.
I think even more than it was in our generation. And
they're very busy.
Yeah. So I feel like it's something she knows she can do, mm-hmm. and it's something that she will probably come back to at some point mm-hmm. in her life. But, even if she doesn't, I mean, it's, the way I look at it is, if you taste test something, then when you're ready for it, you can find your way back. And if mm-hmm. you're not, and that's not the end of the world. But my favorite thing, and I do think about this sometimes, because I feel glad that she does know some basics, is that I saw this in relation to knitting, but I think it applies to crochet and sewing and all that. knitting's not a hobby. It's a post-apocalyptic life skill. And I thought, yes, I have life skills. I will be valuable when the zombies land.
Indeed. I totally agree. Yes, exactly. I can make things that are warm, right?
Mm-hmm. So, and we gardened for a few years, too. Yeah. It's kind of in that same principle of,
you never know.
Well... Yeah, my folks gardened a lot when I was a kid, which honestly was more annoying than anything. We had a very small thing, but it's like, okay, see, food can be grown,
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple of different. We're going to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Where do you like to go shopping for? Do you go shop online? Do you shop at certain shops for things? Where do you shop for craft or fabrics or like where do you like to play?
So, if I could go play. Mm-hmm. Like I have all the money in the world play, mm-hmm. I would probably go back to this quilt shop in Joliet, Illinois, which I actually used to live pretty darn close to, mm-hmm.
Called
Robert's Sewing Center. It's fantastic, and I will say that the fabrics that the quilt shops carry, they just feel so much nicer. Mm-hmm. And occasionally I'll see some in places like, in mass market mm-hmm. shopping places like Joanne, which I frequent really regularly. Just because of where we're at, I tend to go to Joanne more than Michael's. Also mm-hmm. because I do a lot of sewing crafts.
Michael's doesn't have fabric.
No, Michael's does not have fabric.
So craft.
But they have better stuff for like jewelry making and more selection in that regard. Right. So sometimes I'll stop there, and that's kind of a special thing too. But like I said, more often just because of location, it's Joanne's that I go to. But there's something about all those bolts in the quilt store.
When you made that huge quilt, did you go to a quilt shop, or
yes,
did you?
we went to two quilts.
Right?
We went to the Roberts Sewing Center because at the time mm-hmm. I was still living in Plainfield, which is, and this is on the north side of mm-hmm. Joliet. And you would never have known what it was from the outside, and they've expanded since. But it was this punsy little looking thing that looked like some kind of, like they might have farm equipment mm-hmm. as a dealer, and the sign was the plainest thing you've ever seen: Roberts Sewing Center, like an Arial bold font or something. It was
right.
It was crazy. But inside it was heaven. And on the day we shopped, we were there like 3 or 4 hours picking out all these fabrics and trying to find the right blends
so hard.
To basically take from dark and the right shades. And we found a quilt backing fabric that it was a beige, but an ivory, but it had sort of a peachy undertone in it that was like, it just went perfectly with what we were doing. And I had heard sometime before that, if you're going to have a bunch of different colors, you're better off having more colors, so like 5 or 6 shades of one color, mm-hmm. that's not going to look so good together. But when you have 12 or 15 shades, suddenly they all start looking good together.
Interesting.
But so that was sort of the same principle that I was working on, and driving my mother just nuts. She'd pull things out and she'd go, "How about this?" I'm like, "Nope, too much green in that," or or this, because I could just see it. Right. I could see it right away.
That's
and
really cool. She
was like, "I believe you."
I don't.
Yeah.
My daughter does. So, and she gets really irritated because I'm like, "Come here. You got to." Mm-hmm. Check this out, because she's got that same color. It's a vision thing, mm-hmm. like you're just born with that visiony, colory thing, and I don't have that, but she does.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, but you can learn those things because
better.
My husband, he has improved so much over the years of being drug into fabric shops, and he'll be like, "Well, what do you think about this?" And and know that or this. He's like, "Is this one too greenish or too reddish or whatever?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's a good call you did."
Husband, like, that's good.
And I'm like, you're growing as a person. Because he used to joke that he could only see in Windows default color mode. So
that's very funny. Now, do you buy online, or would you buy online?
I would buy online, preferably with you know, if I had some knowledge of the fabric or something, I mean, you know, somewhat, it's about color for me first, but it's also about touch, you know, and when you get that really supple fabric that, you know, that's the stuff that I like